we're going to talk about 3 variations of manuscript speaking that you may do at some point, and I'll give you tips to improve your manuscript delivery. This is part 2 in a 4-part series on the different types of speeches and approaches to speech delivery. As Stephen Lucas explains in one of the most popular public speaking books available, a manuscript speech is delivered word for word and is meticulously prepared. This means the speaker reads directly from a script. The key, of course, is to attempt to sound natural and even conversational while relying on a verbatim script. Most people struggle with this, but some people are pretty good at it. On the downside, speaking from a word-for-word script can often come across as robotic. You've probably heard people read their papers in a classroom situation. That's not the most inspiring experience for listeners. Now, on the plus side, many people like to speak word for word because they want to get it exactly right and they don't want to take any chances. I almost never recommend speaking from a word-for-word script for live, in-person speeches, but it does have some special use cases that we'll talk about. In that light, I'm going to show you how natural manuscript delivery can sound and look if you know what you're doing. So let's play a little game right now. I want you to try to figure out whether or not I'm reading from a word-for-word manuscript or if I'm just looking at more limited notes like an outline. So pause the video, leave a comment with your guess, and explain why you think that. And of course, I will reveal the answer at the end. Now, when might you speak from a word-for-word manuscript? Well, first, the teleprompter is one common way we speak from a script these days. Most speakers won't be using a teleprompter for a live in-person speech, like an in-person event, but presidents use them for big speeches, actors use them at the Academy Awards, for example. People on TV news or talk shows or late-night comics often rely on a teleprompter. Those are usually considered public speaking because even though they're talking to the camera directly, there's usually a live audience there or at least some other listeners in the room that they're delivering to as well. Second, most professionals have the option to read from a script when they deliver a message live on Zoom calls or similar platforms. I don't recommend reading word for word live on Zoom. It usually doesn't hold people's attention, but if you're going to do it, then you have to get a little creative and maybe move your pages up on the screen near the camera that you're looking at on your computer so you're not looking down the whole time. I know a few people who do this so well, you can't tell they're reading at all. It looks like they're looking right at the camera, which of course, to you as the viewer, looks like they're looking at you with eye contact. But in most cases, it's pretty obvious that people are reading their presentations on Zoom when they're reading because their eyes are down on the page and they sound stiff. They don't look like they have any natural spontaneity. And that's why I don't recommend reading word for word on Zoom, but it is an option. And third, you might read a speech printed on old-fashioned paper. You're likely to see this at more formal events like graduations, wedding ceremonies, religious events, and other formal situations where most speakers don't want to take any chances or there's a set program they have to stick to. There's usually a podium with a microphone at events like this, and people put their pages right on the podium. Speakers are not expected to walk around the stage and connect with their audience at these formal ceremonies, so a paper, manuscript, and the podium goes hand in hand. Businesses sometimes have formal events like this, maybe once or twice per year. So the typical situations you might use a script are a teleprompter, your own computer on a Zoom call, for example, and old-fashioned paper when you're speaking at a podium for more formal events. In other words, you probably will at some point speak from a manuscript if you're a full-time working professional. Now let's look at 4 tips to prepare and deliver a manuscript speech more effectively so you don't sound like that robot reading your middle school paper. The first tip is to use dictation software when you're writing your speech. Many people will handwrite or type their speech, but instead of typing, I recommend speaking into your computer microphone. In Google Docs, for example, you can select this under Tools and then select an option called Voice Typing. This works like your phone if you use the voice-to-text option. So you have to go back and make sure you edit it because the software won't always transcribe it just right. But when I do this, I might say something 3 times in 3 slightly different ways until I get it right, and then I delete the others. But here's why I recommend using dictation software. Most of us don't write like we speak. So if you've ever heard somebody reading almost anything aloud, it can sound very unnatural and mechanical, and the structure of their sentences usually is too complex for reading aloud. If you start with typing, it's a much more demanding editing process to make it sound conversational, and sometimes it just won't work. But if you start with talking, you're guaranteed to sound more conversational right from the first draft. Number 2, practice aloud so you can hear how it sounds and feel the words coming out of your mouth. some words don't lead naturally from one to the next when you speak. For me, it could be that I've chosen words that have too many syllables or words that have too many of the same sounds in them. So here's a little trick I use. Anytime I stumble over a phrase or a small piece of a sentence when I'm practicing, I just change those words and find an easier way to say it. I was working on a script recently and stumbled over the words didn't sound redundant a couple of times. And for some reason, all of those D sounds right next to each other kept tripping me up like a little tongue twister. So I stopped and found a more natural way to say exactly the same thing. Don't waste your time fighting through difficult phrases and sentences over and over. Use practice repetitions to make it easier on yourself. Just change the words to set yourself up for success. 3, get lots of repetitions. Just like any other type of public speaking, I practice my manuscript speaking at least 10 times or more. One of the key disadvantages of speaking directly from a script is that speakers often get so locked in on the pages or the teleprompter, they lose almost all connection with the audience. But this is called public speaking, not public reading. You want to practice so much that you get it to the point where you're no longer concerned about the reading part of it. For me, by the time I speak my message on the day to the camera or to a live audience, I want to make sure I put all my energy into connecting with eye contact, gestures, volume, enthusiasm. You also want to practice looking away from the manuscript here and there without losing your place. To bring your message to life, you have to practice until your entire delivery is on point and your message then touches people. And the only way to do that is to get lots of reps until it sounds and feels natural. And the 4th tip is when in doubt, use shorter sentences. Just like most other types of public speaking, one of the best approaches is to say a short sentence and then pause. Say a short sentence and then pause. That's the pattern you should aim for. This gives listeners a moment to absorb what you're saying, but it also will give you this nice, comfortable, confident cadence. I'll sometimes come across a really long sentence in a manuscript when I'm practicing my reps. And that can make me confused about how I want it to sound by the time I get to the end. So when that happens, I just stop practicing and I'll take that long sentence and I'll break it into 2 shorter sentences. And that almost always helps me sound more confident and comfortable. Here's a summary of what we've talked about in terms of the times and the places you might speak from a manuscript and the tips to help you improve your preparation and delivery. And now I will reveal whether or not I'm speaking from a word-for-word script right now or from more limited notes. If you haven't made your guess yet, of course, pause the video right now. Type in your guess in the comment section before you hear me reveal. Drum roll, please. I'm speaking from a word-for-word script, even right now. You probably guessed that correctly because that's the subject of this video, and you're no doubt watching me really closely, but I wanted to practice what I preach, and I hope this video has shown you that following the tips we've been talking about can make speaking from a manuscript sound almost as natural as a conversation. As mentioned, this is part 2 in a 4-part series about the types of public speaking. Next up is extemporaneous speaking. Be sure to check out all of the parts to this in the description below the video. I'll put links to that as I post each video. Until next time, thanks, God bless, and I will see you soon.